We have to talk about the UFC Hall of Fame, obviously. Vanderlei, Anderson, Shogun, kind of the last of an era, the Pride era that transitioned to UFC. So I guess, what do you make of this class of Frankie Edgar, of course, going in as well? So what do you make of this class of Hall of Famers?
Super excited for my dear friend Frankie Edgar, and I would throw it back to my dear friends here on the other side of the microphones. Is this the best Hall of Fame class that we've ever had? I think a lot of you remember acutely where you were when Chael Sonnen fought Anderson Silva. I was voicing highlights at ESPN in Bristol, Connecticut, and the baseball highlights were backing up because I was watching Chael and Anderson Silva. So that fight could headline a class. But then you got Frankie Edgar and Joanna, and then guys who go by one name, Vanderlei and Shogun. This is my 12th year doing it, right? I started on stage at the Fan Expo with Tito Ortiz in 2012. I think this might be the deepest Hall of Fame class we've ever had.
In terms of, like you talked about, those one-name people, we're kind of...
Like Nomar, Garcia Parra, for example, right.
Kobe, Jordan, we don't really see that much anymore in MMA. Conor, you can't really, maybe Ronda, Joanna, but, why do you think we don't see as many massive global superstars like that that can go by the one name like this?
It's a good question. I can't necessarily speak to the one name component. I think Poetan's doing pretty good to have us not utter Alex Pereira and just start calling him Poetan. But gosh, when I think about Vanderlei Silva hitting that tunnel and Sandstorm playing, and I'm not even the most throwback UFC fan out there, but Vanderlei Silva rings true with generations of fight fans. We can all remember, whatever he does and the song and everything else. And, a lot of my formative years with the UFC were calling Shogun Rua fights. So, yeah, those two guys are just exceedingly special to me, to Brazil, to this sport. And, the cupboard's never bare. There's always superstars when you least expect it. But in terms of the one-name guys, few and far between since Shogun and Vanderlei.
Your tryout run, was that the Shogun Henderson fight?
Yeah, this guy's got a great memory. Yeah, so they tried me out with 5 different analysts trying to determine who was going to be my broadcast partner, and Frank Mir and I were able to call that fight between Shogun Rua and Dan Henderson. That audio has never seen the light of day, thank God.
And Vanderlei was on that company?
Yeah. What a night.
John, it's kind of the elephant in the room, but Anderson Silva, not here last year, not here this year. Does it bum you out at all to have such a legend not be here to accept these moments?
I'm trying to get back to my room to prep UFC 303, and I saw how long Frankie Edgar's speech is. So, I'm sure Chael Sonnen will do right by Anderson Silva, and hopefully he can find some connective tissue there to maybe tie Anderson in. It is disappointing, but I'm happy that the company still stands by Anderson Silva and still gestures in his direction, even if he doesn't reciprocate. I don't necessarily know the inner workings. I was not surprised to hear that he was not here, but hopefully Chael Sonnen, with his way of words, can carry the torch somehow, some way.
John, on Fight Incorporated, got to see a little bit of that behind the scenes, you, DC, talking to John Jones. Can you talk about having those conversations with the superstars, and how does that inform what eventually makes it to the broadcast, having that very private one-on-one time behind closed doors?
So oftentimes when you hear a lot of the copy that I write on pay-per-view, a lot of those nuggets come from those fighter meetings. Huge resource for us, not just to get that information or to watch the media day scrums, but to actually sit in a room with them and maybe even trigger some emotions at some point in time. To be able to be part of a fighter meeting with Jon Jones and Daniel Cormier is sort of a unique environment that you referenced in Fight Inc. But we get to peel back the curtain. We see a side of Sean Strickland and Colby Covington that a lot of the fan base doesn't necessarily see. So I really enjoy our fighter meetings, and certainly when I get probed about these fights on the front end of the fighter meetings, oftentimes my responses are a lot different than on the back end when I've sat down with these athletes.
Then I want to ask you, we know how our jobs are different when a name like Conor McGregor is involved. Obviously he's not part of this one after all, but what is your life like when a Conor McGregor is part of an event? What do the people in your life want to talk to you about that probably, like us, don't normally care that we talk about UFC?
Well, thankfully, they're not asking me about Jake fucking Paul when Conor McGregor's fighting, right? But no, I messaged Conor after UFC 300, and I said the only thing bigger than 300 is McGregor versus anybody, right? So the biggest thing we can do is to have a Conor McGregor-led pay-per-view. That's not our reality this weekend, but this company obviously comes to the rescue and is able to produce a deeper pay-per-view. And I've been waxing optimistic on Conor for a long time. I fully expect him to compete in 2024, to come back at a high level, fight twice in 8 months. I know it sounds ridiculous and super ambitious to some people, but I just know the mixed martial arts athlete within there, and I just remain hopeful that he's going to come back and make more of an impact than anybody expects that he will. As far as my week is concerned, I came from Saudi Arabia. We had a lot of defections there. I prepped 3 or 4 fighters that didn't end up competing there, so I'm on the hamster wheel, my man. 56 fighters or so in 2 weeks, and it'll be a sprint to Saturday night.
John, you've done your fighter meetings and everything, right? Already?
Yeah.
A lot of short notice athletes on this card main event. Like, what's your sense when you talk to them about just their preparedness, and then when you go into the fight, how much does that factor into your call? Because if Alex loses, we're going to talk about the tone.
Sure.
For Australia, so how do you kind of work that in?
Unique situation where we essentially have the final 6 athletes on the card dealing with this variable, this challenge of being on short notice. I think a lot of these guys are lying to my face. I asked a lot of them the same question, like, what is the biggest challenge of accepting a fight without a traditional training camp? And some of them said there's really no challenge at all. I think a guy like Diego Lopez really doesn't see this as much different than his everyday, but I think we might get some real answers on the back end that we didn't necessarily get on Thursday. Thank you, guys.